continuing our Introduction to Personality course, and we started to investigate so-called cognitive experiential domain. In last video, we tried to talk and discuss cognitive styles, personal construct theory, locus of control theory, explanatory styles, and learned helplessness phenomena, including self-efficacy concept. In this part of the lecture, we will start from intelligence. It's not a secret that intelligence plays a vital and important role in our lives, and we categorize people based on their intellectual abilities, and it influences our performance in educational setting, on job places, our interpersonal relationships, and so on. In this sense, it's very important to consider connections between intelligence and personality characteristics and how it might correlate and be connected. The field of research in intelligence is quite vast and includes many theory and hundreds and thousands of research articles. So we will try to cover this briefly, just underlying the milestones and the most important concepts in this field. Basically, if we speak about the modern views on intelligence, all theories can be divided into two big groups. First group of theories is so-called achievement view of intelligence. In these groups of theories, intelligence is associated with educational attainment, how much knowledge a person has acquired relative to others in their age and cohort. So basically, we compared all the peers together, and those who know more and can perform better, they have better achievements. We say, oh, those people more intelligent and other people less intelligent. Right? It's one view on intelligence as a result, achievement, performance. Aptitude view on intelligence, like another group of theories, focuses not on achievement itself, but on ability to become educated, on ability to perform. So aptitude to learn, right? So the potential and talent people possibly have, and not necessarily applied yet, but their potential. Right? So it's two different views on intelligence and two different understanding what intelligence is. So intelligence in general, we usually measure it through IQ tests or intelligence quotient tests. And basically, IQ is a total score derived from standardized tests on intelligence, which we use as a metric to assess people's intelligence. First IQ tests were developed more than 100 years ago by French psychologists Alfred Binet and Theodore Simon in 1905 regarding to big educational reform in France, which was conducted at the beginning of the 20th century. Since then, different IQ tests became very popular in all countries in the world. They advanced and were adjusted and improved many times. So we have many tests and revisions which measure different aspects of IQ. And the abbreviation IQ itself, intelligence quotient, was introduced in 1912 by psychologist William Stern. This is an interesting fact, which not all psychologists actually know, but William Stern actually coined this term. So usually IQ is measured in standardized scales with mean score 100 and standard deviation 15. It means that average is 100, standard deviation is 15, so 66% of people have a mean score plus minus 1 standard deviation. It means that 66% of people are having IQ in the range from 85 to 115. This is considered to be normal average IQ. If a person has IQ score higher or lower than one standard deviation, for example, IQ which is higher than 115 or IQ lower than 85, it's considered to be lower or higher than average. So, and 96% of people fit in the range of mean score plus minus 2 standard deviations, so from 70 to 130, and 99% of people fit into 3 standard deviations, so it would be 55 to 145. More than 145 is considered to be absolute genius, less than 55 considered to be very low on intelligence, probably connected with some mental disorders or health problems. Right, so most of people fit into the range from 85 to 150 on all IQ tests. So all IQ tests specifically designed to measure this is in one scale, so-called IQ scale, which always have a mean score 100 and standard deviation of 15. The most popular tests on IQ are Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale, WAIS, and Wechsler Intelligence Scale for Children. Though there are several dozens of very popular and well-established intellectual tests, including Stanford Binet Scale and others, measuring different aspects of intelligence, so they have a bit different procedure of what certain abilities are measured, how long this test takes time, how the results are calculated, and so on. But technically, a Wechsler scale is the most popular nowadays and is considered to be one of few so-called default tests on intelligence. People who study intelligence actually debating, should we consider like intelligence as a general thing, like you're either intelligent or not, or we have like multiple intelligences, which represent our different abilities in different fields, right? So Charles Spearman, famous psychologist and statistician, probably heard about his Spearman coefficient of correlation and factor analysis. Both statistical procedures were invented by Charles Spearman, but he also is famous for his research on intelligence. And in 1920s, 1930s, he introduced two factors theory of intelligence, where he introduced ideas that basically intelligence should be understood as a general intelligence, and this you like either smart or not, and this is one big factor which is responsible for your performance in different tasks. Other psychologists disagreed with Charles Spearman and started to think that maybe you can be like smart in math, but not very smart in English, and at the same time have very nice musical abilities, for example, singing and playing different musical instruments. And so we actually need to think about multiple intelligences. The problem with multiple intelligences theories is like how many intelligences we should distinguish, and what's the difference between intelligence and just special abilities. Do we even need the concept of intelligence? So it was quite a debate. One of the most famous proponents of multiple intelligences are like Louis Thurstone, Joy Guilford, Howard Gardner, and Robert Sternberg. So they showed like pretty strong evidence of multiple intelligences existence, but unfortunately it doesn't solve all the problems in the field. Intelligence itself connected with many things. I found very interesting research on the connection between cultural factors and society. So basically, what is considered to be intelligent behavior is very different across different cultures and countries. And for Western society, usually to be intelligent is to be good at math and verbal abilities. So being able to speak beautifully, to write beautifully, and to work with text. But for many other cultures, those abilities are not that relevant, and they focus on interpersonal intelligence and ability to deal with other people, on emotional intelligence, or musical abilities, or bodily kinesthetic intelligence. So it heavily depends on the culture, and we shouldn't generalize our Western society understanding of intelligence because it's very cultural, specific for our type of society. Another interesting research shows that people with high intelligence actually do not use it for finding the truth in the debates. When there are debates and discussion, intelligent people mostly use intelligence to prove their point of view, which they already had before the debate started. So they're more prone to confirmation bias, not less, as we could expect, because they're so smart. So actually, often intelligent people do not use intelligence for finding the real answers. They use it to justify the course of actions they already took. So, which is actually quite fascinating. What is also interesting about the intelligence is so-called Flynn effect. So if you take a look at this graph, on the vertical axis, there are average IQ scores for big groups of people, populational research. And on the horizontal axis is years when those research were conducted. And you can see that average intelligence IQ scores grew from 1954 to the year 1998 approximately, steadily rising, but then starting to decline. This was called Flynn effect in the honor of the person who discovered this and observed and described it first, Flynn. What is interesting, no one actually knows why it happened. So why average IQ grew up approximately 1 point every 4 or 5 years in the past. But what we observe now is so-called reverse Flynn effect. So starting from approximately 1998, the average IQ scores start to decline. And again, we do not completely sure why it is happening, but it has negative impact because actually the smarter population is, the better economic development is. So when the population average IQ score declines even 1-2 points, which is kind of insignificant statistically speaking, but it already negatively affects gross domestic product and other economic metrics. So actually, the consequences of the declining intelligence are negative, and we need to understand why the reverse Flynn effect is happening, but it's not that simple to find a plausible explanation and test it. Anyways, intelligence plays an important role when we speak about personality development and life choices, including educational and career trajectories of people. But high intelligence level do not necessarily lead to life success and high life satisfaction. So initially, researchers on intelligence suppose that higher intelligence is actually a guarantee of better life, but longitudinal research, including Louis Terman's famous longitudinal study, actually showed that people with high intelligence levels not necessarily become successful and more happier people in life. So it's actually more complicated connection than we initially saw. So speaking about emotions and personality, right? So emotions also play an important role, equal importance as intelligence when we speak about personality and personality development. We also know that different people have different emotional styles. a different range of emotions they experience and how they express it. But before we will talk about individual differences in emotion expression and experiencing, we just need to refresh the general information, what like are emotions and how it works. So basically, emotion is a complex reaction pattern involving experiential, behavioral, and physiological components. So when you experience emotion, basically it has physiological components that just bodily changes you experience, for example, increase of certain hormones or neuromediators, reaction of your nervous system in your body connected with certain emotion. You have experiential component, how it feels inside on the psychological level, like are you sad or angry or happy or agitated and so on. And there is behavioral components of how do you express or not express your emotion outside in communication or even without others, right? So when we got angry and we feel angry inside, we often have physiological reaction of increased adrenaline and noradrenaline. We become red, but again, what you will do on behavioral level. Some people start to fight, some people start to yell at others, people like smack some objects, but some people try to stay calm on the surface and experience everything inside. So behavioral component might be different, and behavioral component is actually culturally influenced. So the way how you express your emotion different in different countries, but the way how you experience emotion inside and physiological component are just a bit more universal compared to that. Right, so giving those three components of emotion, we need to decide how we actually understand emotions and how we should research them. Basically, there are some so-called methodological debates in the field of studying emotions. So psychologists experience a lot of disagreement on how should we understand emotions and how we should study and what type of research design we should use. So psychologists distinguish emotional states and emotional traits. So emotional states are transitory, depend more on situation or specific person. Just you got into certain situation, you experience certain short-term emotion connected with this situation. For example, you wanted to cross the street, but traffic light became red, and now you're getting late, and you experience frustration, right? It's an emotional state in a certain situation. Emotional traits, on the other hand, are patterns of emotional reaction, which a person consistently experience across variety of situations. For example, some people naturally more prone to anger, and they become irritated and angry quite fast in different situations. It can be like grocery shops, they're frustrated because of huge line, or they can be frustrated on the road because of the traffic jam, or they can be frustrated when they wait to get their cup of coffee, right? So they have emotional trait, for example, here being prone to anger, and it's not situational specific, it just rather their trait or pattern, they're prone to react the same way or similar way in many situations. So how we should actually research it? Should we focus more on the situational aspect of emotions, studying emotional states, or we should study like emotional traits? It's quite a debate inside psychology of emotion. Another debate, one of the hottest in this field, is how we should study emotion in general. So there is a categorical approach and dimensional approach. So psychologists from categorical approach suppose that there are some basic emotions which we can categorize and define. So, for example, like anger, joy, anxiety, or sadness, So people from categorical approach understand emotions similar to how they are represented in the Disney cartoon Inside Out, right? There are several distinct emotions, joy, sadness, anger, disgust, fear, and they kind of exist, and they are very separate from each other, and we can clearly distinguish where is one emotion and where is another. Dimensional approach is different. So they suppose that we can draw a certain dimensions, like a graph, usually ranging emotions from pleasant to unpleasant, and from like active, strong emotions to like weak emotions with less arousability. And we can place any emotional state in those coordinates and compare different emotional states with each other. So, for example, different between sadness and anger is not like they both unpleasant, but anger is more active, energetic emotion, while sadness is implies lower activation, right? So if we will put those emotions onto this graph, they will be just placed on different things, but the difference between those emotions can be not qualitative, but quantitative, right? So it's two absolutely different approaches to emotions, and probably you know theories from both. For example, popular theories from categorical approach are, for example, famous Ekman theory of emotions with 6 basic emotions: anger, disgust, fear, joy, sadness, and surprise. Other popular theories of emotion you might encounter listed on the slide, including Carol Izard's theory with 8 basic emotions, or Plutchik wheel of emotions, and so on. So they have a bit different criteria how they distinguish emotions. Like, for example, Paul Ekman distinguishes them based on behavioral component, how we express emotions. And he collected a huge amount of pictures of how people experience emotions in different cultures, people of different age and sex, and categorize that 6 emotions are expressed the same way in all cultures, ages, and sexes, and thus they should be considered as 6 universal emotions based on their behavioral expression. Izard, for example, created his classification of 8 basic emotions based on the motivation to take specific action. It's just different criteria. Plutchik based his wheel of emotion more on like biological, physiological component of emotion, right? Given that emotions have this 3 pieces structure, you can base your classification on a bit different principles. So dimensional approach, as I said, usually puts all emotions in the system of 2 coordinates with high and low activation being in the vertical axis and pleasant, unpleasant emotions being horizontal axis. So emotions, for example, high on activation and pleasant can be just excited. Being excited implies high activation and is pleasant emotion. Emotion which is unpleasant and low on activation would be feeling bored, right? No energy, unpleasant, right? So anxiety is high activation with unpleasant emotion, low activation but pleasant, just feeling relaxed, calm, tranquil, right? So basically, researchers who use this methodological approach can put any emotions in those coordinates, as I mentioned before, and try to see the difference between them in this way. So both approaches have their strengths and weaknesses. So categorical approach helps to classify emotions a bit better, but unfortunately faces this problem. So, okay, if there are a certain amount of basic emotions, how many of those emotions exist? And there is no definitive answer to that. Dimensional approach, on the other hand, actually deals with this amount of emotion quite well. There can be hundreds of emotional states, and you can place all of them into those coordinates. But it doesn't address the problem of what is the qualitative difference between expressing and experiencing those emotions. So this is the weakness of this approach, and there is no correct answer to this question, how you actually should research emotions. And final debate is like content with contrast style. So should we focus on specific kind of emotions that person experiences, or on the way how this emotion experience, like what or how, content or style, right? So when we research, we should focus on what people experience, on how people experience, right? And this, the result in the process, debate is actually also important on how you design your research. So what we know about connection between emotional states and personality? Personality and emotions have certain connections. For example, in how people experience happiness, and the research of happiness is basically lies on the intersection between personality psychology and psychology of emotions. So first of all, happiness has certain correlation with just demographic characteristics, not personality characteristics, just demographic. So research on happiness didn't find sex difference in life satisfaction. So men and women kind of equally happy or unhappy, depends on the country and culture. They didn't find age differences in happiness, but the reasons, like what makes you happy, of course, is different. Like when you're age 5, you can be happy because of a bag of chips, but when you're 45, probably you need something else to feel happy, right? It's quite obvious, but the overall level of happiness is probably approximately the same. And ethnic identity is unrelated to subjective well-being. So this is not what brings the difference between people. So what is a bit more important? So national differences. People from poor countries less happy. This is quite understandable, right? So people who can't afford some necessities, of course, feel more stressed and less happy than people who can, right? So Canada is an example of rich country where most of people do not experience problems with shelter and food and clothing, but it's not the same in other parts of the world, and people from poorer countries actually less happy. People from countries with unstable political regimes less happy, again, quite obvious. If your civil and political rights are violated, you feel danger, you feel stressed, maybe there is a threat for your life and well-being, and of course you will be less happy compared to countries with good political system where your civil and political rights are well protected, and you can trust your government, and you can rely on social programs and police and health. Basically, differences in economic development of nations may be a key source of difference in happiness, right? So economically developed countries have overall more goods and services and often also political rights, and it makes their citizens more happy compared to countries who are economically developing and experience those unfortunate problems. So in poor countries, financial status predicts happiness. So if you live in a poor country with low in average incomes, the richer you are, the happier you are. But it's not the same for economically developed countries like Canada, because the basic correlation is the level of happiness increases with your income, but only to the point of approximately like middle class life, when you can afford necessities, shelter, clothing, maybe vacation, some basic things. After that, happiness and income start to correlate weaker and weaker, and connection doesn't work in a linear way. So that's why with societies with higher standard of living, income has a weak connection with happiness, much weaker. So because most of the people already have this level where they can afford necessities, and they become happy or unhappy based on other factors, because income is not everything. Yes, we have some other important things in our life. So about personality characteristics, people with high extroversion and low neuroticism, big 5 personality traits, have a higher level of happiness. So they are more active and they experience less negative emotions because they're extroverted. They have more social contacts and possible support in the situation where they can experience difficulties. So they know more people, they can ask them for help and they will help. And because they score low on neuroticism, they don't take everything that seriously and close to their heart. So they kind of can switch their mind and don't stuck on a negative affect. So why it happens? So possible explanation. The first one is so-called indirect model. Personality causes a person to create a certain lifestyle. So I basically kind of lean towards this explanation personally. So direct model, personality causes emotional reactions. So the connection is just straightforward. I suppose it's mediated with the lifestyle, and probably, in my opinion, indirect model explains this correlation better. But again, both explanations are actually plausible. Neuroticism has a lot of connections with unpleasant emotions, obviously, just because of the definition of neuroticism. So people who score high on neuroticism, moody, touchy, irritable, anxious, unstable, pessimistic, and complaining, right? So they experience more negative emotions, and they experience them in a wider range of situations. So that's why neuroticism positively correlates with experiencing many unpleasant emotions, and neuroticism actually highly stable over time. It's that's why it's one of among big 5 personality traits, and it shows consistency over time and moderate irritability. So probably it's also connected with genetics and physiological factors as well. Fortunately, as we already discussed in lectures on dispositional domains, people can decrease the level of neuroticism, for example, through psychotherapy, but cannot completely change their personality to an opposite. So psychologists who study neuroticism, some of them focus on biological explanations, focusing on physiological and genetical components of neuroticism. Other psychologists mostly focus on cognitive explanation of neuroticism, the way how people think and explain and attribute their emotions might actually influence how they interpret situations and why they experience a lot of negative emotions in wider range of situations. So one of the examples is depression. We know that it's mental disorder, including in all classifications of mental disorder. It's a negative affective state, ranging from unhappiness and disconnect to an extreme feeling of sadness, pessimism, and despondency that interferes with daily life. So when people suffer from depression, it affects their physical conditions, cognitive and social, cognitive operations and social contacts. So patterns and symptoms of depression often include altered eating and sleeping habits, lack of energy, difficulty in concentration and making decisions, withdrawal from social activities, and of course decreased mood, which is not specific to situation and lasts for more than 2 weeks. So depression is actually widespread. So in Canada, at least 8% of population suffers from depression. That's many dozens of thousands of people, actually. So what we know about depression? Depression included in Diagnostic and Statistic Manual of Mental Disorders. DSM-5 is a classification introduced by American Psychiatric Association, and it is used in the United States and Canada. What explanations of depression we currently have? The first one is so-called diathesis stress model, that some people have pre-existing genetic vulnerability towards stress, and when they face this severe stress, they develop depression. So even people with genetic predisposition do not necessarily have depression. It needs to coincide with some severe stress in their life. People who don't have this genetic predisposition, even under severe stress, do not develop depression at all, so they cope with it with other methods. Another theory which tries to explain it is Aaron Beck's cognitive theory. Aaron Beck is the founder of cognitive behavioral therapy. He supposed that cognitive styles of how we perceive and explain situation around us create predisposition and vulnerability toward developing depression. So Aaron Beck, one of the most prominent psychologists of all time, so I wish to tell you his biography. Actually, his parents were like immigrants from Russian Empire, and they fled Russia because of Jewish pogroms and ethnic hatred, which Russian Empire was unfortunately famous for. They immigrated to the United States. Aaron Beck was very talented in education and studies. He graduated from Brown University, prestigious university in the United States, at 21, and got medical doctor degree at Yale University, even more prestigious university, at the age of 25, very early. He completed military service as assistant chief of neuropsychiatry at Valley Forge Army Hospital in the US military, so during World War II. He was engaged by George Kelly personal construct theory, which we discussed in previous video, and Jean Piaget schemas theory. So Jean Piaget is a famous Switzerland psychologist who is considered to be forefather of cognitive psychology. And Aaron Beck collaborated with another very famous psychologist and psychotherapist, Albert Ellis, who is famous for creating a rational emotive therapy. Aaron Beck's main creation is cognitive behavioral therapy, which is nowadays considered to be almost default type of psychotherapy in psychological counseling. He got married in 1950, had 4 children. Actually, his daughter Judy is now a superstar in cognitive behavioral therapy, which her father invented. And he died in his sleep at the age 100. So he lived a very, very long and interesting life. So what were ideas of Aaron Beck on depression? And actually, those publications made him famous in the first place. He supposed that there is a so-called cognitive triad, which people with depression suffer from. So they feel bad about themselves, thinking they're like bad and stupid, and they're incapable of doing good things, which is already not very nice. Because of that, they have negative views about the future. So because they are bad, they don't think it will change in the future, right? It's stable. So they don't think the situation will become better in future. And they also suppose that the world itself is also bad and hostile towards them. And when you think about like all your environment and life in those categories, you are bad, the world is bad, and the future is bad, it creates this cognitive triad of depression, which makes people depressed and does not allow them to exit this unfortunate triangle. So back therapy was aimed to change those cognitive interpretations on all three aspects of this cognitive triad. So about views of oneself, about views about the world, and about views of future, and thus cures the depression through changing cognitive style, which actually is quite successful. So, but usually no one denies a biological component of depression, and usually cognitive therapy is combined with biological psychopharmacological treatment. So neurotransmitter theory of depression, which focuses on a biological factor, focuses on what happens inside the brain and what neurotransmitters are working and what their amount inside the brain to find disbalance of what happens in the synapses. Actually, research shows that depression is connected with this imbalance with norepinephrine or noradrenaline, serotonin, and a bit dopamine. So when people suffer from depression, the balance of those neurotransmitters inside their brain is changed. And we actually can provide people with psychopharmacological treatment to return that back to normal. So many drugs which used to treat depression are aimed to balance those neurotransmitters. Popular products such as Prozac, Zoloft, or Paxil inhibit reuptake of serotonin in synapses. So when serotonin is emitted in the synaptic gap, they block reuptake process, so this serotonin stays in the synaptic gap, and the overall amount of serotonin grows inside synapses, which helps to normalize person feelings and decline the feeling of depression. Tofranil works to maintain better balance between levels of serotonin and norepinephrine at the same time. So as I said, in modern treatment of depression, usually antidepressants such as like Zoloft and Prozac are used in pair with cognitive therapy, and in this sense, depression is quite curable, and people can get proper help and get rid of depression completely. So the prognosis is actually quite positive. Emotions also unpleasant emotions also connected with the feeling of anger and hostility, not only depression and sadness. And hostility basically is a tendency to respond to everyday frustrations with anger and aggression, right? So no one likes frustration, but people do not necessarily respond to frustration with anger. Some people respond with sadness, some people respond with passivity, but some people more prone to hostile responses. And anger is different. Anger is emotion characterized by tension and hostility arising from frustration, real or imagined injury by another, or perceived injustice. So basically, anger is emotion, hostility is a behavioral reaction. It's not exactly the same, though they're interconnected. So chronic hostility is a component of so-called type A behavior. Type A and type B behavior, it's two types of behavior. Type A is characterized by competing with everyone, showing hostility, and time urgency. So people with type A behavior compete with everyone, respond with a lot of aggression to any frustration, and always trying to hurry up other people working faster. The factor of hostility actually contributes to the heart disease. So people with type A behavior suffer from different heart diseases much more frequently compared to type B. Type B people, more relaxed, slow pacing, and they don't try to compete with everyone else, and they just live more calmly. So type A behavior is not good for health and not good for social communication either. People also might be hostile not because they have type A behavior, but also because they might have brain injury. So childhood brain damage can contribute to higher rates of violence and aggression in adult age. So sometimes it's connected with neurological trauma. Biological differences in brain function between violent and non-violent individuals connected to prefrontal cortex, areas of brain responsible for self-control. So basically, non-violent people do not necessarily like more friendly, they just control their behavior much better. So they know that they shouldn't express this openly because it might harm their social relationships, other people, their social status, and so on. Some people with less developed prefrontal cortex just do not control their behavior to the same extent, and when they feel those impulses, they just start to act more impulsively. So recent studies document the trajectory of having poor anger management in childhood, leading to higher rates of violence and aggression in adulthood. So unfortunately, this characteristic hostility persists, and people who are like prone to anger in childhood and do not know how to cope it usually brings those habits into their adult life, where it becomes much more dangerous and harmful for other people. And finally, emotional styles. So emotional styles is how, not what, but how you express emotions. So hostility and depression and happiness is what you experience, is content. And speaking about style in those debates we discussed several minutes earlier. So people have different emotional styles. It's individual difference between. So there are some characteristics of emotional style. First of all, high affect intensity. So people who experience their emotions strongly and they're very reactive in their emotions. So people, if they experience emotions, they experience strong emotions. So they experience strong ups and downs based on the emotions they have. People with low affect intensity, when they experience emotions, those emotions much weaker and mild, so they don't experience this roller coaster with their emotions, and they're much more calm in average in their life. So it's just natural difference between people, and obviously people with high affect intensity have harder times in regulating their emotions because from the beginning they experience emotion as something much more stronger. So affect intensity is basically how people score on this dimension. The second dimension is mood variability. It's frequent fluctuation in emotional lives over time. Basically, how often your mood changes. And some people have very stable mood, so they woke up in a positive mood and they stay positive the whole day, or they woke up in a negative mood, they stay calm, negative the whole day, sorry. But some people experience frequent swings in their mood. So 1 hour they're happy, another hour they're angry, next hour they're sad, and it constantly changes. So mood variability might be different. And also people can experience frequent positive affects and frequent negative affects. Again, unfortunately, some people who score high on neuroticism prone to experience frequent negative affects, or they get upset, angry, anxious from wider range of situations. So those characteristics contribute to your emotional style. So, for example, people who score low on affect intensity, they experience mild emotions, but frequent positive affect can be very easygoing. Right? They're mostly positive, but their positivity is not that strong. They kind of chill and calm, and it's easy to deal with them. But for example, people who experience frequent negative affect and high affect intensity, their emotional style is quite problematic. So they experience a lot of distress, and they can be agitated and depressed, and they express it a lot. And for them, it's very hard to cope with all those emotions, because once they start to experience emotions, they're so strong, and mostly they're negative, right? So it might bring them much more problems. So those individual styles can be beneficial or non-beneficial, again, based on circumstances, because people with different emotional styles always can find their niche in life where their emotional style can serve and help them well, though with some emotional styles like high intensity, frequent negative affect, it might be more difficult. But on the other hand, people who experience a lot of strong negative emotions often can be more empathetic toward other people, because they understand how bad it feels inside when you experience those strong emotions, and they can understand pain and sorrow of other people better, which might make them like better counseling psychologists. So it not necessarily always brings disadvantages, right? We should think about those emotional styles as giving us certain benefits in different environments. Thank you for your attention. In next videos, we continue discussing cognitive experiential domain, but we will focus on the concept of self and how we actually can research the self and how it's correlated with different personality traits, and what methodological approach we can use for studying self. Thank you.